Welcome to CDL School Pros. Today we're breaking down how President Donald Trump's recent election victory could bring significant changes to the trucking industry. These new policies might redefine the road ahead for CDL holders. Let's get started. First, let's look at regulatory adjustments. The Trump administration is expected to revisit and potentially relax certain trucking regulations. For example, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's proposed rule on speed limiters for trucks, initially set for January 2025, might be delayed or even indefinitely postponed. This rule would have mandated speed-limiting devices on commercial trucks weighing over 26,001 pounds. But Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who has been a strong opponent of mandatory speed limiters, has co-sponsored legislation to block this rule. Supporters of this delay argue that speed limiters could actually pose safety concerns. Picture this. You're in your truck, merging onto a busy highway, but with a speed limiter, you're restricted to a lower max speed, even as other cars zip past you. You'd have less flexibility to safely merge or adjust quickly to sudden hazards on the road. Another big concern is speed differentials. When trucks are limited to a slower max speed, they can end up moving significantly slower than the surrounding traffic. This can cause congestion, and drivers in faster vehicles might get frustrated, leading them to make risky moves like abrupt lane changes or tailgating to pass you. For drivers, it's not just about convenience. It's about having enough control to adapt to road conditions safely and match the flow of traffic when necessary. That's why some drivers and industry groups support delaying this regulation, so drivers retain that critical flexibility on the road. Next, let's talk about autonomous vehicle policies and what they could mean for the trucking industry. Previous administrations laid out extensive guidelines for integrating autonomous trucks into U.S. roadways. There were regulations around testing, safety protocols, and even an emphasis on keeping the U.S. at the forefront of this technology. But the Trump administration might take a different approach, a more hands-off, industry-driven framework. This could mean that instead of the government setting the rules, private companies would have more freedom to decide how they develop and deploy autonomous trucks. On-screen text. Background Policies on Autonomous Vehicles, 2017, Automated Driving Systems. 2.0, Voluntary Guidelines for Testing and Deployment. 2018, Automated Vehicles, 3.0, a framework covering all transportation modes, 2020, AV. 4.0, strong focus on U.S. leadership in autonomous tech. This hands-off approach could mean we see autonomous trucks on the road sooner than expected, and that brings both benefits and challenges for drivers. On the plus side, autonomous technology could take on some of the more routine or tiring parts of driving, possibly making life easier for truckers. But there's another side to this too. Faster rollout means that changes could come at a pace that's hard for the industry to adjust to. For drivers, that could mean big shifts in what the job looks like, or even fewer jobs on the road if autonomous tech takes on more of the driving. This shift to an industry-driven approach puts a lot of trust in the companies developing these technologies and will likely speed up innovation. But it also leaves some uncertainty for drivers and could make it harder to ensure that these new technologies benefit everyone involved. On the economic front, proposed tariffs on imports, particularly from China, are aimed at encouraging U.S. companies to bring production back home. By making foreign goods more expensive, the hope is that domestic manufacturing will become more appealing, stimulating American industries and creating more demand for transportation to move these American-made products. So, what does that mean for truckers? Well, an increase in domestic manufacturing would likely mean more freight to haul, creating more job opportunities and potentially driving up wages for CDL holders. It's a big win in terms of work opportunities and could lead to a more stable freight market, but there are a few key considerations here. Moving supply chains back to the U.S. takes time and significant investment, and it's not an overnight change. Higher production costs in the U.S. could also mean higher prices for consumers, and that could affect demand for American-made products if prices rise too much. In short, if everything goes as planned, this shift could mean more work, more jobs, and stronger wages for drivers. But the real impact depends on how smoothly businesses can transition production back to the U.S. and how American consumers react to those potential price changes. It's a strategy that could bring big rewards, but with some risks along the way. Let's talk tax reforms and what they could mean for the trucking industry. The Trump administration is looking to reduce corporate taxes, especially for US-based manufacturers, lowering the rate from 21% to around 15%. The idea is to make it more attractive for companies to invest in American manufacturing, fueling economic growth and keeping jobs here at home. For truck drivers, this push could bring real benefits. As US production ramps up, freight volumes would likely increase, leading to more consistent work and potentially higher pay as demand for drivers grows. But there's a catch. This growth depends on whether our infrastructure can handle the extra load. Moving more raw materials to factories and finished goods to stores requires expanded and updated transportation networks. Without investing in infrastructure, even the best tax cuts can only go so far in creating new work opportunities for drivers. So, while these tax cuts could bring more work and stability, the full benefits will depend on how well our transportation systems are prepared to support this increased demand for US-made goods. Imagine it's the end of a long day on the road. You're ready to rest, but you can't find a parking spot anywhere. Sound familiar? That's the reality for so many drivers across the country. And it's why the administration may support the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. This legislation aims to tackle the severe shortage of truck parking spots by allocating $755 million over the next 3 years. To build and expand parking areas across the US, it would provide safe, accessible rest areas, where drivers can park without the stress of searching for hours or ending up in unsafe spots. Key provisions of the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, $755 million allocation, 2024-2026, funding for new parking spaces, facility expansions, and technology to track available spots. With increased safe parking options, drivers would have an easier time staying compliant with hours of service regulations, reducing the risks of fatigue and unsafe parking. Industry groups like the American Trucking Associations and the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association are fully behind this initiative, seeing it as a huge step toward improved driver safety and job satisfaction. Let's talk about independent contractor status and what it means for truck drivers. This issue revolves around whether drivers are classified as employees or independent contractors, each with different benefits and trade-offs. Under the Department of Labor's 2021 rule, the economic reality test was used to decide who qualifies as an independent contractor. This rule looked at how much control a worker has over their work and how financially dependent they are on a company. If the driver had significant control over their schedule and wasn't solely dependent on one employer, they could be classified as an independent contractor. The Trump administration may bring back this rule, making it easier for companies to classify drivers as contractors instead of employees. For drivers, this could mean more freedom to choose assignments, set their schedules, and work with multiple companies. It's the kind of flexibility that can be appealing for those who want to run their own operation or have control over their hours. But with that freedom comes trade-offs. Independent contractors don't receive traditional employee benefits, like health insurance, paid time off, or retirement plans. They're also responsible for their own taxes, which means paying both the employee and employer portions of Social Security and Medicare, something known as the self-employment tax. Over time, these costs add up, impacting long-term financial security. So, while being an independent contractor offers flexibility and the appeal of running your own business, it also means giving up certain benefits and taking on additional financial responsibilities. This policy change could give drivers more choice, but it also requires careful consideration of the trade-offs. Let's talk about freight brokers and why changes in their regulations could matter for drivers. Freight brokers are the middlemen between shippers and drivers. They help arrange loads and negotiate rates. But sometimes, drivers don't have a clear picture of what brokers are charging or how much they're keeping in fees. That lack of transparency can lead to frustration and confusion around earnings. The Trump administration is considering revisiting broker regulations to increase transparency and fairness. One proposal would require brokers to share more information about transaction details, so drivers can see exactly what's being charged and what's going to whom. This kind of transparency could help drivers make more informed choices about which loads to take and could prevent brokers from taking an unfair share of the rate. Freight broker regulation proposals: stronger enforcement of transaction transparency, authority to curb unauthorized broker activities, like double brokering and fraud. Another area of focus is unauthorized activities like double brokering. In double brokering, a broker might take a load and reassign it to another broker, adding extra fees and often lowering the rate that eventually reaches the driver. Stricter enforcement of broker regulations could help curb these kinds of practices, making it easier for drivers to receive fair compensation. So, on the one hand, these changes could mean better earnings and more protection for drivers. But with less regulation in some areas, there may be new risks, which means drivers will still need to be careful and watchful in their dealings with brokers. It's about balancing better transparency with the need for drivers to stay vigilant. In summary, These anticipated policy shifts focus on deregulation and economic measures aimed at benefiting the trucking industry and CDL drivers, but their impact will depend on implementation and how the industry adapts. Staying informed will be essential in navigating the road ahead. Thanks for watching CDL School Pros. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on trucking industry news. Keep on trucking!